Good morning. Another wonderful morning here in South Africa. And today we have Samantha Bramley, all the way from the UK, who's come to join us, and she's bringing us some warm weather. Thank you very much, Samantha. Great to have you here. Samantha is going to be talking to us about a subject that's actually very dear to our hearts. And we've been talking about this subject for the last few weeks with the Leadership Mirror series, where we had Vili Snyman on. Vili, thanks for joining us today. We also had Paul Jackson on. And today we have Samantha, and she's going to be ending the series in leadership. So one of the things that we spoke about is that how does one actually execute clarity while the ground actually moves beneath us? And as we know, life is changing all the time. It's so dynamic. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the series, but quickly, let me just quickly introduce our co-hosts who always come and join us and give us valuable insights from their perspectives on what the discussion is about. So welcome, Glenn. Great to have you here. Glenn's he's a purpose coach. He finds out what your purpose is. And he plans it. So thanks for joining us. Then we have Russell. He's a sales coach. And he basically he looks at how you can actually make sales, and he helps you to actually make sure that your sales actually funnel works and so on and so forth. Then we have Wilhelm Lombard. Wilhelm, welcome. Wilhelm's a team's performance coach. So he goes along and makes sure that everybody here the teams actually perform to the utmost. And that's something we're going to be talking on and touching on with Samantha. And then we have Vili Snyman. And Vili actually hosted the show on China and his whole trip to China and leadership in China, which was a few weeks ago, which was very interesting. And then we have Mana Bouwer, my wife. Welcome, Mana. Great to have you on the show. Mana is a successful business person, so she comes from a total business point of view. And then to our star of the show, Samantha Bramley. Great to have you, Samantha, all the way from the UK. And Samantha's going to be talking to us about clarity and how to actually do that and get clarity when things are actually just changing all the time beneath us. So that's a wonderful. So welcome to the show. Just a little bit about Samantha. Samantha, and she likes to be called Sam. So hi, Sam. So Sam has been in the leadership industry for the last 23 years. So she's got a lot of experience. She's a renowned speaker. She's got a lot of qualifications behind her regarding leadership. So it's really great to have you here, Sam. And one of the things that obviously that brought my whole attention to yourself and saying, yeah, we need you on the show was we're doing this Leadership Mirror series. And we were talking to, about leadership and so on. And one of the things that really stood out for me was when you said, getting clarity when things are moving around us all the time. And that's exactly what's happening. The world actually changes every moment. 1 minute we are in a war with Iran, the next minute we're not. Where do we stand? How do we actually navigate through this? And Samantha's going to be talking to us a little bit about that. So Samantha, I'm going to hand over the show to you. And then after that, we will go around and ask each of our co-hosts to give their perspectives and ask questions. And then right at the end of the show, we'll ask what our big takeaway is. So welcome, Samantha. Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. And as you say, all the way from the UK. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm truly excited. So yeah, I was curious when I received the message from David only a week ago to say, hey, will you join us on Vision 2026? I was thinking, goodness me, what an opportunity. So this morning, I'm hoping to make this a fairly concise presentation, and then we'll go into a bit more conversation afterwards. But when I was thinking about today's conversation and building a couple of slides, I kept coming back to one question myself, and it was, since when was leadership ever defined as having all of the answers? But today, yet we feel like we're expected to have the answers, because as David quite rightly said, markets changing overnight, artificial intelligence is reshaping the way that we work, and teams are asking for more and more support, whilst organizations are asking for better and more performance. And yet somewhere in the middle, all of this, there's a really exceptional leader that's doing their best to stay calm in that chaos, trying to create that certainty when they often don't feel it themselves. So today isn't about another leadership model. It's about what actually, I believe, helps leaders execute when the ground underneath them is shifting. Because the best leaders I've had the opportunity to work with don't wait for that certainty. They learn how to lead through that uncertainty. So leading today feels less like following, I guess, a well-marked path. And if you're a hiker like I am, you look for a bit of a path. But actually today it feels like more climbing a mountain where I guess the weather's changing every single hour. So I'm looking forward to going through this with you. So hopefully if you've got any questions, please feel free to pop them directly into the chat function as well. So let's look at what leaders are carrying then, because I don't think leaders under pressure are because they're doing something wrong. And I want to kind of make that statement pretty clear. I think that leaders today are under pressure because they're carrying more than any generation of leaders before them. They're making the decisions with incomplete information. They're balancing commercial outcomes with human well-being, and they're also navigating that constant change while they're trying to help people and keep them engaged, in particular their team. Now, what I've noticed over the years is that pressure underneath is a bit of a bubble, and yet it quietly becomes something very, very normal. So the problem is when we then normalize that pressure, when we're so used to working with that high adrenaline, that high cortisol, we stop noticing then the impact that it has on us as an individual, not just physically, may I add, but on the quality of our thinking. Because pressure narrows all of our perspective. And when our perspective then starts to narrow, so then in turn do the discussions and the way that then we lead. So vision alone is not enough. So what do I mean by that? So every organization I've worked with, and hopefully you'll agree with me here, they have a brilliant vision. They cast that vision. Most have strategy. Many of the organizations have highly talented people. So I guess the question is, why do many people struggle with execution? Because vision tells us where we're going. It's our North Star. It doesn't yet tell us what matters today, but clarity does. Clarity has the questions like, what's the priority? What can wait? Who's going to own this? And what decisions need to be made now? And hesitation is incredibly expensive in business. So think of it this way. If the vision is our summit, clarity then is knowing where we're going to place our next step and how we're going to place that next step. And then thinking about that pressure, it doesn't then just change the leadership. It reveals it. So one of the biggest lessons that I've learned personally in leadership is that pressure doesn't change who we are, but yet it magnifies who we already are. And I'm going to repeat that. So pressure doesn't change who we are. It magnifies who we already are. So some leaders become reactive. Some avoid those difficult conversations. Also, some leaders tend to tighten the control because it might feel safer to do so. And others, they sometimes become simply overwhelmed. And none of these responses mean that somebody is a bad leader. And I want to be really clear on that. We're all human. We're all having human responses. So the question isn't, do I do this? The question is, how can I recognize it before it starts to impact the people around me? So self-awareness is one of the greatest leadership advantages that we all have, but sometimes we don't all tune into it, okay? So let's dive into that, I guess, in a little tiny bit more detail. Add another layer to that. So what's simply put here is that, for me, this slide doesn't quite capture the work I do, but actually it captures the essence better. So pressure's always there. We've made that clear from the beginning, right? Pressure happens all around us. But actually, yet we don't get to choose the pressure. But we are able to choose that time in between the pressure and our response. And it's in that particular moment that is going to make the difference. Sometimes it's only a few seconds, but it's definitely there. That moment is there. There's a pause where leadership lives, okay? And that's where the emotional intelligence lives. It's where our mental fitness lives. It's where leaders who create that calm in their teams are much calmer because life's easier. So they're calmer because they've trained themselves not to let pressure make those decisions. They've trained themselves to really start to understand, am I reacting? Am I coming from a place of consciousness, or am I coming from an unconscious behavior? And one of my beautiful favorite quotes here is from Viktor Frankl. And he said, between stimulus and response, there is that space. And I want you to remember that that space changes everything, okay? So what does clarity then look like during uncertainty? And that's a question for all of us, because it might look slightly different. So when organizations become a little bit uncertain, people don't need more information. And that's humanly where we tend to go. Let's give more, okay? But actually what they're looking for is more clarity. And I've found that there are really three things that people are looking for, as you can see on this slide. So what matters most, who's making the decision, and what do I need to focus on today to make the impact? And leaders sometimes think that they need every single answer, but I just don't think that's true. People don't expect perfection, they expect direction, okay? So even saying things like, I don't know yet, but here's what we do know, okay? This starts to create a trust, and trust is really needed when we're thinking about how we're leading and inspiring others. So how do we protect our performance without sacrificing well-being? For a long time, leadership was rewarded with exhaustion, okay? Busy became a badge of honor that everybody wore. Yeah, you know, Samantha works from 6, 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, being available all the time. It sometimes now becomes a new commitment. But we're starting now to see the cost of that. And burnout doesn't create that better performance. It reduces creativity. It reduces our decision quality. It reduces our relationships and how we're building them. But it also stifles innovation. Now, I've coached a number of senior leaders to know that the highest performers don't work harder than everybody else. And I'm kind of grimacing as I'm saying that because I'm probably going to make a few people unhappy. But it's true. The best performers are those that recover better, they regulate significantly better, but also they know that sustainable performance isn't soft, it's strategic. So nobody reaches that summit sprinting that entire climb all the way up. You just burn yourself out. You'd be utterly exhausted. Sustainable performance really requires pacing. It requires recovery, knowing when to pause, and also knowing your own ability. And that's a really important perspective to think about here. So as I mentioned the word trust a few moments ago, why did I mention trust? So one thing that I've learned working with teams around the world is that connection is not built when things are easy. Sure, we can all build a connection, right? but it's really built when things get hard. And the best teams are built aren't the ones that don't have conflict. They're the ones where people feel safe enough to speak up, to challenge, in, of course, a respectfully way. They're ones that can ask for help. They're ones that can admit their own mistakes, but also to put their ideas forward respectively and trying something new. And I always say, if we're going to fail, let's fail fast. Let's learn and let's draw a line and share those learnings. So psychological safety isn't lowering any standards. It's creating an environment where people can just utterly perform at their best. Because silence is far more dangerous than a disagreement. And there is evidence of this, okay? So I don't know if you've heard of Project Aristotle that Google did, where they looked at the success metrics of their teams. But one of the biggest factors of success was psychological safety. It wasn't those individuals that were amazing at their jobs. It wasn't the individuals that had huge amounts of resources. It was the psychological safety. So if we think about how we're going to be building that trust and stay connected as a team and be able to do all those things I just mentioned, we are going to be setting ourselves up for success and being able to move forward with clarity. So there are 8 leadership skills that I'd love to be able to touch upon today. And if I could leave you with a handful, I guess, of practical shifts, it would be these, okay? So move from needing all of the answers to asking much better questions. It will serve you incredibly well, and it will serve the teams that you lead even better. Go from controlling to creating ownership, okay? So stop holding on to something so tight. When we do, actually it constricts ourselves, but it also constricts others. So create that ownership for your team members. Go from reacting to responding. And sometimes it's just about that utter pause. And sometimes that, 1 or 2 seconds feels like it's the longest time in the world, but it just allows you to self-regulate and understand, where am I feeling this? Where am I holding the tension? What can I do to be a better leader? Okay. And go from being utterly busy to being really intentional. And a top tip I would say is, let's stop having like an hour meetings in our diaries. I speak to many leaders across the globe and say to them, schedule a 45-minute meeting, create clear agendas, ensure everybody knows what they're bringing to the meetings, and then have accountability when you leave. And you'll find that people shift. They also then know that they've got a little bit of time to decompress, and also they can start actioning. There's nothing worse than having a day in our schedule where we're back to back in all of these meetings, and yet we never seem to be proactive in getting things done. And then the other one is really around leadership today isn't about doing more, okay? It's about thinking differently. Sure, we're going to have lots to do, but actually, how can we think differently to get things done? Because those small shifts that we have create a very different outcome over time. And it's these tiny incremental shifts and the consistency with the clarity that brings us a really great leap forward. And then finally, my thought today is that clarity is not the absence of uncertainty. Okay, so I'll leave you with just this thought. The mountain, as you can see here, doesn't move because we have great strategy. It moves because we take the next step. That's just one clear step. What can you see in front of you? What's gone behind you and what's beneath you? And then the next step, and then the next step. And leadership isn't about eliminating the uncertainty. It's about helping people move through it. And I've learned that people rarely remember every decision a leader's made. But guess what? They always remember how that leader made them feel. Did that leader create clarity? Did that leader create confidence? Did they give me hope? Because in an uncertain times, the leaders leave behind their legacy. And the best leaders don't carry every single body to the top. They help others find the confidence to take that next step. So a huge, huge thank you for today. Thank you for letting me share my thoughts with you. I'm Samantha Bramley, and I look forward to the further conversation.
Wow, that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. You know, as you're talking there, Samantha, one of the things that came up for me, I was thinking back to when I was working for Oath Arab in the 1990s, years ago. And I was living in Mauritius, and I was working on I was the actual project manager for the first high-rise building to be built in Mauritius. It's still standing. But my boss at the time, he said to me, you know, David, stop working and start thinking. And it was like, huh? Sorry, what do you mean by that? And what you just mentioned was, you know, there's always a better way than what you're actually doing now. And you've got to actually think that through. And yeah, that was like, wow, for me. Thank you very much for that. Wow, this has been a fascinating little discussion where you've actually brought so many gems in such a short presentation to us. And I was scribbling down notes here. And, you know, one of the things that I really liked was, you know, how do you actually, you know, build trust between the various, you know, your teammates? And maybe that's a question for Willem to ask just now. So I won't take that one away from him. But what I'm going to do is go around the room, and I'm going to hand over to Mana first. And I'm going to ask Mana to ask you any questions that she may have about leadership, since she's the business lady in this room, and she's the one who actually has a team that works for her every day. Mana, over to you.
Hi, Samantha. Yes, that was really amazing. Puts a whole new spotlight on leadership, or new angle. My question would be, from a relationship and a well-being perspective, what happens inside a team when leaders push for performance but ignore the human cost?
Yeah, great question. So I'm sure that you've seen it like I've seen it, Mana. Many individuals will start to get turned off, I guess. You'll see either people become a little bit more recluse. They probably are not executing well. There's normally quite a lot of overwhelm. Team communication starts to break down. There are many little signs that you'll see. Some people tend to go on autopilot, and the work just isn't getting done, right? And when people start to withdraw, great leaders are able to see and understand their teams and understand the individuals behind them and actually those behaviors. So as you see their well-being go down, as you're starting to see then productivity and accountability go down, it all goes hand in hand. So it's about understanding as things are moving, what do I need? Who is the individual that's struggling the most? What capacity do they have? Are their capabilities starting to diminish? And then you can start as a leader being able to try and think of a way that you can help, or just have those honest conversations to say, hey, what's going on? Am I being clear? Have you got everything that you need?
That's also almost an answer to my follow-up question here was, how can leaders then create a culture where people feel safe enough to speak honestly? And I think the emphasis on honestly, because sometimes I would say something that you want to hear, but how do you create that culture where they're honest with you and still remain accountability for the results? Because I often found then when people get too close to you, some accountability goes out the door. So you need to balance it out. And how do you balance that?
Yeah, so for me, I believe it all starts with building a strong foundation and a strong relationship, and showing up with an amount of vulnerability yourself as a leader. So, you know, saying we don't have the answers, being utterly honest. If you're feeling a bit of overwhelm, calling it out, right? It doesn't mean that we have to act in a certain way. But I think teams and individuals that you should be inspiring and that follow you, because ideally we need to be winning the hearts and minds of individuals, not striking a fire underneath their feet. So in order for them to feel psychologically safe, they need to be comfortable with you, but also they need to be comfortable with the team around them. So great team building is certainly one of them, understanding people's strengths, where there's opportunities for people to grow. And also inviting thoughts into the room. And I'm a great believer, if we've got a number of introverts in the team, and I've been one of them in time, inviting that voice in first is a great example of how we can build some psychological safety. There's no such thing as a stupid question, in my very humble opinion. So it's, how do we really encourage people to be the best version of themselves and work together as a team? So does that answer your question, Anna?
That's an amazing answer. Thank you very much. Back to you, David.
Thanks so much, Mona, for that. Thanks, Samantha. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, and this is based on the latest post that I did for you this morning, Samantha. When leaders are under pressure, how can they protect standards and keep people accountable without creating fear and becoming overly controlling? And what prompted this question is, in South Africa, when you walk around, specifically in certain areas, you see lots of broken windows. And the first thing that I look at is, why is that window broken? And secondly, more importantly, why hasn't it been fixed? And I think that's something that happens with leadership, when things and standards aren't kept to the way that they should be. So how do you believe that we can actually protect those standards from a leadership point of view?
Yeah, great. I'd like to say a great question, but there are many facets in that, David. So I'm going to do my best to try and answer. So I love what you're saying to me, and I'm also disappointed to hear about the windows, but it's a great metaphor and perspective in leadership. So there's two things. I think when we strip everything back in leadership, and particularly when we look in organizations, whether they're small startups or, your big blockbuster organizations that are enormous, it all starts with culture. And believe it or not, we can create a culture that has some amazing words, but actually if those words are not lived behaviors, the culture is worth nothing. So for me, I'm a huge believer that actually if we create a culture and we are the culture as leaders, we demonstrate the standards, we hold ourselves accountable, we're inspiring others to follow as well. So things like there is a consequence if we don't get this task done, and the consequence is X, Y, and Z. Where are we on this journey together? How do we support each other? What else do you need? Are all these types of questions. So start and lead with curiosity and vulnerability, but also be very firm in terms of we have a target to meet. We wouldn't be paid for our job today if it wasn't for what we're delivering or the impact that we're creating. So I think being crystal clear with that and helping people get there, and understanding that when there are struggles, sometimes the struggles are going to be out of our control. It could be in a matrix organization. I know that all too well, waiting for something to come or trying to enable something else. So it's just about being crystal clear and ensuring that both the strategy, the outcomes, and the impact is well written, but it's well lived and documented, so you can see those success metrics as you're moving forward. Does that answer your question, David?
Absolutely, and it gives you a very clear picture about how actually to ensure standards are met. Thank you very much, Samantha. I'm going to hand over to Glenn. Glenn, I'm sure you've got a great question for Samantha. Sam.
First of all, Sam, thank you very much. That was really brilliant. Love that. I'm all about leadership myself, and I really love that. You really summarized everything that I think about in terms of leadership. It was really good. I noticed that Steve Sharpley actually asked a question there, which is really my question as well, and you've effectively answered it already in your presentation, but I'd like you to touch on this again. we talk about when the ground is moving, and leaders often discover things about themselves that they may not discover when they're actually calm. So what does that pressure reveal about a leader's inner patterns, values, and self-awareness when that ground is moving to that extent?
Yeah, really great question. So I always think that pressure is a mirror. Why? Because pressure reveals our own habits, it reveals our belief system, and it also reveals our values. So why do I say that? In calm times, we're able to hide our own weaknesses. Okay, we're able to kind of pivot around them a little bit, and we've all got weaknesses. Okay, it's about that self-awareness. But when we're under pressure, it really exposes them. Okay, so when we think about our own self-awareness, we need to allow ourselves to choose an intentional leadership rather than a default behavior. So I think I mentioned something around controlling earlier in my presentation, or perhaps we go into a protecting mode. So pressure doesn't build our character, it just reveals the habits. So the more self-aware we become, the more we can start to think about, how do I move from being unconscious in my behavior and my thought pattern and my actions to more conscious? And I work with the Leadership 360 as a diagnostic tool, which looks at conscious and unconscious behaviors. And I humbly believe it's one of the best on the market because it enables you to see a snapshot in time, but it also really dives into those unconscious behaviors from a 360 perspective. And actually, once you've got that, as long as you want to self-develop and be the best that you can be, it provides a gift for you to be able to think about, how do I move through this?
Excellent. Oftentimes I actually use the analogy of a petal or flower, a rose petal. If you just have that rose petal, you smell it, it smells great. You start putting pressure on it, the smell comes out even stronger. And the challenge sometimes when leaders are in control and that ground moves, that smell that comes out is not too good.
Great metaphor, Glenn.
Yeah. My next question, by the way, the flower remains the same. It's exactly what you spoke about. The flower doesn't change. It's just the pressure that actually brings out what's inside. And oftentimes what's inside is really not good. And we need to think about that. Okay, my next question is, how can leaders pause long enough to choose a better response? So to add to that now, and again, you've spoken about this, but I really want you to touch on this again. I think it's so important.
Yeah, so I was pausing there deliberately. So a pause, okay? So think of it as asking yourself, what's needed from me right in this moment? Breathe. There's one thing we're guaranteed in life. We come into this world with breath and we exit with breath. And we've got complete control over it. So actually, if we think about how we're breathing and we slow that down and we respond from a purpose instead of an emotion, that's called mental fitness in action, because that pause then creates the possibility. So we're responding rather than reacting. The last point I would make on this, Glenn, is around leading always from a place of curiosity, not as a place of blame or assumptions.
Excellent.
If we come from a place of curiosity, we're more likely to be able to connect with others, but also we're more likely to succeed.
Love that. Excellent. Love that. Thank you very much, Sam. Back to you,
you.
David.
I like that one. And actually, you brought up the blaming, and Moni's got an issue about blaming, and the issue, and Wilhelm actually's got this whole thing about blaming, and I think that's the next step. I think we should go over to Wilhelm next. And I love that. Come from a place of curiosity rather than a place of blaming. I love that. Wilhelm, what do you have to say about that? And what questions do you have for Sam?
Thank you very much, David. And yeah, thank you, Sam. This is absolutely incredible. And you talk my type of language. I love these things. talking about blaming, I always say blame stands for be lame. The moment when you blame, you are lame. So I'm a life energy coach. Energy is everything. When you talk about burnout, for over 4 years, I'm studying the thing of burnout before they even talk about the word burnout. But yes, and one of the biggest energy draining factors is blame. The moment when you blame, you just drain your energy and the other person that you blame's energy. But okay, thank you for that. Thinking about leadership, it's all about the team, isn't that? Because you can't be a leader if you don't have a team or followers. As John Maxwell said, then you're only taking a walk if you think you are a leader and there's no followers. So what I want to ask you, from a team performance perspective, what practical rhythms or disciplines help teams stay aligned when priorities are shifting?
Great question. And I just want to go back to something you said. I love that blame, and I completely agree. And I love what you're saying around energy as well here. I'm a huge believer that we are the energy of our team. So the energy that we bring, whether it's intentional or non-intentional, sets the tone. So thinking about how we're showing up and what energy we want to bring. Do we want to bring calm? Do we need to bring more fun and energy into the room? People learn best when it's fun. So I love that point. So I just wanted to kind of go there first. So I think your question was what rhythms keep teams aligned, or what kind of teams, what rhythms can we utilize? Is that correct? Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah. What practical rhythms or disciplines help teams stay aligned when priorities are shifting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always utilize a little bit of a simple framework. So it's really around communication. So are we communicating and not just dictating? Are we clear and concise and have clarity? So how are we making decisions? And how are we being consistent? So things don't need to be said much louder. Things just need to be clear. So things like weekly priority reviews or regular check-ins, ownership and consistent communication and tracking. In uncertainty, the rhythms can become really reassuring for people to ensure that they're still moving, whether it's a boat or they're hiking or a plane or a train. You need to be heading in that same direction, but equally we need to be moving together. Because as soon as some uncertainty comes, what I've found is that many teams start to go off in a little bit of silo. So creating a rhythm of confidence and clarity and consistency really helps others be able to kind of keep teams aligned and keep them on track.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, actually you answered the next question that I want to ask, but I want us to again think about it. How do leaders keep execution clear without overwhelming the team with too much communication? Communication is important, but too much communication or constant change can be a difficult one. So how do we prevent that from happening?
Yeah, so again, in my humble opinion and also within my experience, I always go back to asking the 3 questions that you probably saw in the presentation. So what's changing, what's staying the same, and what matters most this week? And if you stick to that same talk track, that repetition then is enabling you to create the clarity, and that consistency then beats volume. So you're not asking a million questions. It's 3 things. What's changing, what's staying the same, and what matters most this week? And are you heading towards that North Star? And how are we measuring those milestones?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Back to you, David.
I'm going to put that on my wall. What's changing? What's staying the same? And obviously, I'm putting this on my wall here, and what matters most. Thanks very much for sharing that. Let's go to Russell. Russell, I'm sure you've got some good questions there for Sam. David, you actually started by saying that we're living in an ever-changing world. I was thinking, 30 years back, things were a lot different. There was a lot more securities in the market, and then I get a telephone call. Sorry, let me just quickly switch that off. And so I've had 3 questions, and you've actually answered them in your presentation, and then through the follow-up questions from the others. So I want to look at something else, if I may, just change the direction a little bit. Yes, leadership is about leading people, but leadership is also about the brand. One of the things that I offer as a service is reputation management. And with reputation management is about the brand. A lot of it is about the brand. So I want to throw a little bit of a curveball, if I may, and I want to ask you, my understanding is that the leader, be it the MD, CEO, whatever chairperson of that organization, or just a one-man business, is the custodian of his brand. Therefore, he's got a responsibility and accountability to the brand and whatever the brand associates with. So if you've got a team of 1,000 people that work in your company, the brand is the umbrella that safeguards that team. So as a leader, you've got the responsibility to the brand, but you've also got responsibility to the team. So I want to ask a question, because I've been battling with this question myself for a while. And it's about what came first, the chicken or the egg. So the question is the following, and please, like you said just now, there's no right or wrong, there's no wrong question, but the same is with your thought process. There's no wrong thought process. It's your take. So the question is the following: does the brand evolve the leader, or does the leader evolve the brand? When we look at it in the context of an umbrella, supposed to be securing this organization's livelihood. Just your take on that.
Well, thank you very much for the wild card, Russell. Much appreciated. I don't feel set up at all. So,
my apologies. It's not on purpose. I'm trusting you with this because I'm battling with it myself.
I love a challenging question. And my intuition and my gut instinct here is telling me that there's no right or wrong answer or way to look at it. I think, and I'm going to use give a bit of an example here. So when I think of a brand, I'm going to strip it back right now just for a second, and I'm going to talk about my children. So why will I do this? So when I think about a brand, and if I go shopping, my children will ask for Weetabix. But they want the Weetabix that looks like the Weetabix in the yellow box with the black writing. There are other brands available, by the way. Yet if I was to come home with a Lidl or an Aldi that still has pretty much the same ingredients in, but it looks slightly different on the shelf, do you think I'm going to get the kids to eat it? I've tried, absolutely not. So they're the same ingredients, or very similar, but they look very differently. So the way that they look is also perceived as the way that they behave, because so this is where I'm going with this. So I think when you think about a brand, we could have the best brand ever. I love my visuals, I love my brand, I love what it stands for. But actually, if I was sitting here today and I wasn't honest, I wasn't authentic, I was not vulnerable, I didn't share my thoughts in a way that could compel or inspire others to be the best version of themselves, and somebody else took my brand and actually came across as quite hard, controlling, I think there are different things to play on here. So I think you can have a brand and a leader that does their best to live up to the brand values, but actually can sometimes fall short. Or you can have a leader that has got a phenomenal brand in themselves that also match the brand slightly, but probably overshine the brand, because people buy into people. And I don't know whether I've answered the question accurately, but that was just my take on it.
Well, actually, you've hit the nail on the head with a statement that you made, because when I look at reputation management,
the question is asked, what do they say? And I'm not defining who they are, because they can be subjective or they can be objective, but what do they say about you? And a phrase that you've used is the brand within themselves. And it took me to the case study I did on Motorola, where Motorola was the leading, not Motorola, what was that? The BBM BlackBerry, where BlackBerry was one of the leading telephones on the market at this stage, and they went in the wrong direction because the leader was convinced that he was right, and it ended up being wrong. So I think you've answered about the brand in themselves, and I think that is something that I can really utilize with what I'm doing. Thank you.
No,
Back to you,
thank
David.
you, Russell.
And sorry for the curveball, but I knew you could put it off.
Thank you very much, Russ. I think that's another discussion point that we could have on the show, branding. That's actually a very interesting question. Thanks, Russell, for that. And thanks, Sam, for your answer. Let's go to Billy. Now, Billy's going to, I didn't give Billy any questions on this. So let's hear what Billy has to say. Over to you, Billy.
Yeah, sure. Just a comment, and I do have a question for you, Sam. One thing what came out in your speech and what I really loved is like such a great summary of how leaders should look at their role. I think this is such a brilliant summary. So thank you for this. I recently came from China for a 12-day research trip, and also a bit of a holiday, but more research than holiday. And one thing that I think the Chinese as a nation gets right is the clarity thing. For example, if you go to the museums, for example, the military museum, they will say there, China, how will China look in 2035? How will China look in 2055? And they actually state it, and it's so great to see that from a clarity point of view. Second, the comment I want to make is so important, the power of the pause. Interesting, I'm just writing a book at the moment about my dog that passed away, Sophie, like a year ago. And the central theme in my book is the power of the pause. So I'm using a pause as the as the hook, power of the pause. It's such important. But maybe then one thing, you'd say that, but I think if you could, for every people listening this morning to you, if you can maybe give one practical habit they can start doing tomorrow that you think will have the greatest long-term impact on their leadership, and what would that be? Just quick, from your gut.
Sorry, Willie, say that again. As soon as you said that you lost Sophie, my heart started skipping a beat. So firstly, I'm sorry that you lost your beautiful Sophie, but please repeat the question for me. Thank you.
Sure. If you can give people that listening this morning, one practical habit they can start doing tomorrow that maybe can have the biggest impact on their life going forward?
Really great question. I'm going to say start with yourself. Start with self-awareness. Start to truly understand who you are. Who are you in the times when you get excited? Who are you in the times where things become tough? And understand the behaviors under that, because I think if we start there, we've got that beautiful foundation to be able to learn, to grow, but also then our impact in how we then inspire others. Because I'm a huge believer that actually to be a leader, we don't need a title. We don't need a huge team. My children are phenomenal leaders. I've got friends that are phenomenal leaders and yet have never managed a team, but people choose to follow them. So I think if you can be self-aware, be that best version of yourself, that one habit is checking in with yourself daily. Where am I? Where's my emotions? How am I regulating myself? Then from that platform, you can then set yourself up and people that are inspired, are inspired by you to follow you, and hopefully you can cause that beautiful ripple effect in the world where everybody else then becomes self-aware as well, and the impact of that could be massive.
Thank you, because that automatically, I think we learn a lot in leadership, the what of things, but not always the how. And we sometimes, as if people do not know the how, but if you really know yourself, it will be as if the how will automatically, get there. Thanks a lot. Appreciate this.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Fantastic questions all around. And we've got some questions from the audience, and I'd like to just bring some of them up. There are quite a number. So let's just look at Rodney Wood. Thanks, Rodney. Rodney's made a statement: managing people as a leader is one of the biggest challenges. Being able to get the best out of people can be different for each person. So the ability to differentiate is key. I think the question here is, we all have different leadership skills, Sam, and the question is, what are those? Last week we spoke with Paul Tanton. He was talking about how people aspire to different leaders, and he was talking about the bank code, which is B, which is blueprint, red, which is A is action, N is nurturing, K is knowledge. And we discovered through that process that we aspire to the person that we have the strongest values with. My question here is, how do people differentiate the skills for leadership to, say if you've got a vast team, how do you differentiate yourself to that vast team who have different value systems?
Yeah, interesting. So we're never all going to have the same values, but there's always a common denominator. There's a common thread that will run through. So for me, one of my clear values is gratitude, but actually that might not resonate with other people. Being grateful or saying thank you might fall a little bit lower on somebody's list, but it's about really understanding each other and how do these values come out to play when you're in a team. So I used to work for a phenomenal leader many years ago. And I remember her saying to me that, when she was creating and building her team, it was like a Jerry's chocolate orange. Do you know a chocolate orange?
No.
Yeah? No? Okay. So a chocolate orange, it's literally a chocolate orange. It's chocolate. It's beautiful orange. It's got beautiful bits in. I'm going to now start to say that I'm a chocolate connoisseur, of which I'm absolutely not. But it's made up of tiny segments. When you bang the chocolate orange on the table, all the segments then start to open and disperse. Now, as a team, what we're looking for is to have all of the different segments come as one with unity. Now, of course, at times we're going to have friction, but actually the goal that you are trying to achieve, or the team that you're creating, there's a common denominator in that. So ensuring that you understand what that is, how does it play out, and ensuring that we're getting the best out of those individuals is normally the best way forward. Not trying to force somebody's values or the way that we think or behave on other people. So again, start with the self-awareness, be incredibly curious, and then think, how can I move with people, not move on your own? And I don't know if that answers your question, David.
Thank you very much. I think it does, yes. And I love the curious issue. That's my takeaway for today. But I'm going to quickly go. Steve Sharp, you also asked a question. I think we've answered some of these. Amana?
I wonder if I may. Reverend Godfrey from Uganda actually went through quite some trouble to send a WhatsApp to me because he's unable to post his question. So if it's okay with you, I just wanted to quickly ask his question.
Please.
He works in a church in Uganda, but sometimes I feel like there are several gaps in leadership in some form, especially when you are performing and others are not achieving like you are. There's pressure on others, backbiting, and mistrust. Have you got any advice for Reverend Godfrey from Uganda?
Well, thank you for the great question, Reverend. And I just want you to know this is incredibly common and happens a lot, even in the greatest of teams, particularly when you're going through uncertainty or when potentially you're striving for a goal that's so big that it needs to be broken down by many individuals. So I would say sometimes that backbiting comes because people are not speaking up. People aren't having those open conversations, so that psychological safety perhaps isn't there. So think about ways that you can start to create that psychological safety. How can you get the team in the room and demonstrate that this is a safe space? Everything's said, let's air it. Let's talk about behaviors, not personality. We don't want to start getting defensive. So let's talk about the real problem here, not necessarily a personality. The other thing I would suggest is things like feedback, fast forward feedback. How can you get individuals into the room together? And I would suggest going for a walk rather than trying to give feedback in two chairs. Two eyes meet, tension starts to build. So how do you get them out into nature, perhaps, to just start to ground, to breathe, to relax, and start to think, okay, what can I start? What perhaps do I need to stop, and how do I continue? And again, come from a place of curiosity and come from a place of, let me help you get there, rather than I'm doing it all and I'm not seeing you do anything, or perhaps you're not doing as much as me. So come from a place of curiosity, open up that psychological safety, so you've got a place where you can start to have those conversations that are aired rather than the backbiting, and ensure that you're holding firm standards as a leader and saying this won't be tolerated. Really we're there to hold and live the culture. So hopefully that helps and answers the question. But I'd like to say I could be Harry Potter and wave a magic wand, but normally there's a number of different elements that we need to be doing a little bit of a dance with.
Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you so much. Let's just quickly look at Steve Sharpley's questions. I think we've answered some of them. How do we help leaders build access the ability to pause? The first question. And the second one, how do you help leaders develop greater clarity of mind to think, interact, and act from it? We're running out of time. So, Sam, if you could just quickly look at that.
Super quick. Yeah, great questions. Thank you, Steve. So helping leaders build a pause. I would say start with understanding that individual itself. Sometimes it's hard when you've been on autopilot to all of a sudden slow down. It's the micro moments that make the difference. I'm very happy to connect with you offline so I can give you some more information. But I hold a number of different workshops, one-to-ones. Breathing's just one method. You've got different types of meditation. You've got reflective practice. So there's lots of things that you can do as a leader, but also help your teams. In the second question, to develop greater clarity of mind to think, again, it starts with the individual. So, where are they coming from? How self-aware are they? What's the goal that you're trying to achieve? Is everybody behind that goal? How are you going to get there? What needs to be put in place? And how are you going to interact with those team members, brainstorm, take those collective ideas to be able to really push forward and see something extraordinary in these uncertain times.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was quick. Great. Right. So we're running out of time, but I'm going to go around the room and ask for takeaways from each of our co-hosts, and then we'll do a final wrap up with yourself, Sam. Thank you. So Glenn, let's go around. What's
Thanks,
your big
David. Thanks, Sam. I think I'm going to make a statement here by the late Miles Monroe. Leadership has very little to do with what you do and is fundamentally a matter of becoming who you are. And I think that really pretty much sums it up. So thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you. Mana.
Yes, what you said earlier on, right at the beginning, it reminded me of my mom. She once said that if you really want to know what a man is going to be like, see how he reacts under pressure. So I do my best to work under pressure, but that's so true because really pressure doesn't change you. It reveals who you are. And you were so right about that.
Let's go to Willie. Willie?
Yeah, just again, the power of the pause and the curiosity, like also Sophie was. And then, I think it was Gandhi that was saying, be the person you would others to be. Be yourself, who you like others to be. It also comes out. Thanks a lot, Sam. Great.
Thank you, Willie. Let's go to Russell. Russell?
Definitely my takeaway is brand within themselves. I love that. I think that is really something very strong. Thanks, Samantha.
Thanks, Russell. Let's go to Wilhelm.
Thank you, David. Yes, it's about clarity. Now, clarity and the opposite of clarity is confusion. So make sure you are clear, and a person must take responsibility, a leader, to be clear themselves, because usually they are not clear. They have no clarity. So when they send a message, it's total confusion. So take that responsibility. And confusion is energy draining. It just drain your energy. When there's pressure, then the crack shows. So it's important not to scale if there's cracks, because the pressure will show the cracks. The impact that a leader make around you, that is important to understand that you make an impact. And what's that impact? And often you need to ask them the impact, because you think you are okay, but there's some blind spots. So become clear about that. Culture, I always say, create a positive, energetic work culture, because if there's energy in the culture, then things happen. And it connects with the branding as well, because no energetic branding will not have an effect. Okay, my last thing is busy. You talk about busy, being busy, doing more is actually the recipe for failure, for burnout, which is the key to failure. So if you want to know how to fail, be busy with a lot of stuff, drain your energy, and you will fail. But that's a bit negative. Okay, but thank you very much. That was great.
Wow. I think my biggest takeaway from this whole thing is actually taking that first step so that the mountain can come towards you. I love that. Samantha, please, Sam, please wrap up for us.
Well, firstly, thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed today. Thank you for everybody for showing up with curiosity. I've loved the questions. I'm sorry for those that I haven't managed to answer the questions, but I guess my very simple wrap up today is the future really belongs to leaders who create clarity, who build trust, and those that execute with confidence. So have confidence in your skills, be self-aware, continue to lead with curiosity, and you certainly can't go wrong. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow.
Let's give ourselves a hands of applause. There we are. Excellent. So thank you very much, Sam, for coming all the way from the UK to come and speak to us here in Africa. It's been a pleasure to have you, and thanks to all the co-hosts and to Willie to be here today to share your time and your experience and your thoughts on what Sam has had to share with us. There will be a newsletter, and we will be here next week. We've got some very exciting, we've got two young guys who actually developed something. They started their own brand. Russell, you're going to like that. And they've actually developed something, and we're going to be talking to these two young guys, and we're going to be talking about what they did, where they're going, what their vision is, what clarity they have. And so we're going to be talking to them and seeing how they're progressing and what they're doing. So it's going to be quite a fun scenario to get motivated and to get inspired what can be done. So we'll be talking about that. And Sam, thanks so much for being here. It's been a great pleasure to host you. There will be a newsletter that will come out, and there will also be a takeaway post that will come out on all the takeaways taken today. So thank you. And thanks, Willie, for joining us today. Really, really appreciate that. All right, I'm going to ask you all to stay on, and we'll do the end. So good luck, everyone. Have a fantastic week, and go and implement some of these fantastic things that have been shown today. And I'm going to ask Sam to go through and answer all the questions that are on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So don't worry, your questions will be answered. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a fantastic week. Be blessed.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Oeh. Hij wil niet raak niet. Hold on. Why doesn't want to stop? Sorry.
He's still live, right?
I know.
Druk die groen knoppie.
Welcome to Vision 2026. We give expertise a voice. A platform where bold ideas, lived expertise, and real experience shape how we grow, lead, and create impact in 2026 and beyond. Meet your host, David Bouwer, bid architect and strategic thinker, who helps leaders turn complexity into clarity and gives business leaders a voice that wins in the real world. Marna Rowitz, seasoned strategist and business leader, helping people protect what they've built and grow with clarity, resilience, and foresight. Glenn Lease Jones, Map 4 life coach with decades of experience guiding people and entrepreneurs to find purpose, set direction, and map their journey to meaningful success. Russell John Fagan, sales mastery trainer, who brings practical sales insight and transformational strategies that help individuals and businesses increase their influence and performance. Wilhelm Lombard, human systems and team performance coach focused on helping organizations strengthen team alignment, leadership energy, and human systems, so people are ready for growth before growth exposes weaknesses. Together, we bring unique perspectives and deep expertise so you can think bigger, act bolder, and make 2026 your breakthrough year. Hit that subscribe button now and follow Vision 2026 for your weekly dose of expert insight, future-focused conversations, and real-world perspectives shaping South Africa. This is Vision 2026, giving expertise a voice.